Hello and welcome to Cafe DC. I'm Faiz Rahman. Our guest here is Ambassador Arslan Suleiman, who will talk about the President's speech on the horrific attacks in San Bernardino. And the President spoke right after the attacks, after establishing certain facts about those attacks. And Arslan Suleiman is actually the special envoy, his special envoy to the OIC, which is the Conference of Islamic Countries, or the Organization of Islamic Countries, or Islamic Cooperation. Ambassador Arslan Suleiman, thank you very much for joining us today here.
Thank you, Faiz. Pleasure to be here.
Appreciate your time. So, of course, the atmosphere is grim, and the events after those attacks, even they made it grimmer, so to speak, not for just the Americans, but also a lot of people from around the world. So first, what was your reaction, and where were you when you heard about the terrorist attack in California?
Well, like all Americans, the initial reaction to any of these incidents, terrorist incidents or gun violence incidents, is one of real sorrow. You feel extremely terrible for the victims, and our prayers go out to the victims and their families in this really difficult time. But especially in America these days, when we've had so many incidents of gun violence, we also feel a bit of urgency to really do something about the situation, to really improve the situation, to help protect our communities better, to help ensure that these types of actions don't happen. And in this instance, initially it was unclear about what the motivation was behind some of these attacks, and we've since learned that the individuals who were involved did have some sort of external terrorist motivation to their actions. And so that's another element of concern in an attack like this, when you are worried about external organizations that are seeking to encourage people to commit acts of violence. That's a very serious threat that we take very seriously. And so that was something that we were all watching with great concern and great sorrow. And as a government, of course, we do our best every day to protect the American people and to advance our national security and foreign policy interests. And President Obama, in his remarks that you mentioned from the Oval Office just a couple of days ago, spoke directly about what the United States government is doing in terms of confronting this threat that we face from ISIS, from Daesh. And it's a threat that not just the American people and American government face, but it's primarily a threat to so many of our partners around the world, in particular in Iraq, the people of Syria. They're the ones who are facing the threat most directly, but also our partners and our allies in Turkey and Jordan and other countries in the region, all of whom are part of this global coalition to fight and defeat Daesh or ISIS, as some people call it. And so the president laid out the strategy in order to help work with our allies to deal with direct action against this organization.
Yeah, before actually we go to the president's address on this issue, I wanted to ask, it took him a few days to basically say it and term this attack as act of terrorism. Why it took so long, a few days, before he could actually characterize this as an act of terrorism? And what's the process? And there is a reason why I'm asking you this question. I'll explain that later. But
sure.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's very important to get the facts straight. You don't want to, unfortunately, in this day and age, with 24-hour media coverage, there's a lot of space for people to speculate. And there are a lot of times when that speculation can lead to mistakes and can lead to innocent people being targeted for investigation or targeted for some sort of public, witch hunt or retribution. And the authorities, the FBI, the local police, and firefighting and emergency responders are very well-trained professionals, and they were very careful about what information they were releasing at what time in order to ensure that a full picture was properly developed through the investigation before that information was released and made public. And so, initially, you were following it along with others. It was unclear what the facts were behind this, why this attack took place, why this horrific incident took place. And so that was why we had to give time to our FBI and other law enforcement agencies and authorities
Before you have
to
conclusive
do
evidence.
exactly to kind of develop a full picture. And they're still working on developing that full picture. We still don't have all of the questions answered in terms of these individuals' connections or how the planning process happened and whatnot. We are, of course, familiar with the large cache of weapons and ammunition that they had in their home, most of it which was purchased legally according to the laws currently on the books. And so that's why a lot of the discussion, initially focused on gun violence in America, because that's a very big concern. We've had a number of incidents throughout the year and throughout the past several years, almost daily instances of gun violence and mass shootings happening in this country.
And actually, one of the reasons I asked that question was because overseas, and you deal with those societies a lot as special envoy to the OIC, people don't have a very clear-cut idea of this legal characterization and terminology that, an attack is a terrorist attack or a hate crime or a crime or what have you. So a lot of times you have seen this complaint on the Facebook, on other social media platforms where they say, okay, all right, when an American, quote unquote, a white guy would kill somebody, it's not a terrorist attack and it's he's either a mental case, he has some mental issues. But when a Muslim guy, quote unquote, does something like this, is automatically, immediately a terrorist attack. So there's been a very, constant complaint on the social media about some previous attacks. I mean, right before this attack happened, this Planned Parenthood attack took place. So this is the confusion in the minds of lots of people overseas. So that's why, I asked to clarify you that there's a legal process and basically, before we term any, we classify any crime or any event, we have to go through all the legal procedures.
That's right. And even in the prosecution stage, when individuals, in this case, the individuals were both also killed in the process of their action. But in other cases where the individual has been arrested, like the Planned Parenthood case, it's the job of the prosecutors to also look at exactly what was involved in the case, what elements of the crime are there, to see what crimes this individual could be charged with.
So in this case, there were, they said they were ISIS inspired, but not actually connected with the ISIS. Is it true?
That's the information that we've seen so far, that the individuals apparently did not. From what we've heard so far,
knowledge of their context with any
I'm just
group,
right. Yeah. Speaking about the public information that is available right now, there wasn't any information about this being an attack that was specifically directed at the behest of an organization, and there wasn't any evidence so far that these individuals were members of a designated terrorist organization. So as such, it's been classified so far, it's been discussed so far as some sort of act that was inspired by Daesh, by ISIS.
We'll take a very short break, and after we come back, we'll talk about some other issues related to this incident. Please stay with us. After a few seconds, we'll be back to talk to you again. Thank you.
The President made it very clear, and Secretary Kerry also made it very clear, that the United States doesn't have a discriminatory policy. We have a very strong commitment to non-discrimination, and we have a very strong commitment to religious freedom. And the President said repeatedly that we have no religious test for who enters this country. And he called upon all Americans to reinforce this point.
Welcome back. You're watching Cafe DC. I'm Faiz Rahman, and our guest today is Ambassador Arslan Suleiman, the special envoy to the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Once again, welcome back to the show. Yes, that was, you were talking about the gun violence, the gun control. And yes, until the president spoke, the gun violence, the gun control was also one of his top points in the speech. But right after that, somebody in the public arena said something about Muslims, Mr. Donald Trump, and the whole issue basically fell aside. And we started everybody talking about now Muslims, whether they should be welcomed to this country and whatnot. So what do you think? Let's talk about the gun violence first and gun control, and then we'll come to those comments. So what really happened?
Yeah, well, so as you saw in the president's remarks, the president called on Congress to take specific actions to deal with the issue of gun violence in America. And he specifically looked at this proposal of having people who are on the terrorist no-fly list to also be placed on some sort of a ban on being able to buy handguns and guns more generally. So that's a debate that has to happen in Congress. Obviously, any legislation that addresses that issue has to happen in Congress. But the president made very clear that incidents like this and other incidents of gun violence that we see throughout the country really need to be addressed in a wholesome way, a comprehensive way, and Congress needs to address that issue. So that was his call in those remarks, to look at that issue.
Okay, and then again, Mr. Trump said something about the Muslims, banning them from the United States. So how did that affect the whole debate? And what do you think of those comments, if you may offer your comments?
Well, a number of people have really spoken out on that issue in particular. And the comments that the president made in the Oval Office also spoke to this issue. But you also saw Secretary Kerry today mention it. Many people from the Republican Party itself had comments.
Speaker of the House,
Speaker of the House, the head of the RNC, and others, essentially condemning the statements. Just to echo some of the points that the president made very clear, and Secretary Kerry also made very clear, that the United States doesn't have a discriminatory policy. We have a very strong commitment to non-discrimination, and we have a very strong commitment to religious freedom. And the president said repeatedly that we have no religious test for who enters this country. And he called upon all Americans to reinforce this point, these American values that we have of prohibiting discrimination, rejecting discrimination in all forms, not having a religious test for anyone entering the country or seeking public office, and really holding on to our values of pluralism and unity. Because frankly, organizations like Daesh and ISIS, one of their goals is to create a binary. They want to create an us versus them. They want to create a ISIS versus the West, America versus Islam. And the president has been very clear from day one in office that America is not at war with Islam, never will be at war with Islam. And so the message is that any ideas, any proposals out there that seek to divide people, that seek to say that we want to ban a certain religion from entering this country, that's on its face un-American, and that on its face is counterproductive. It's going to make America less safe rather than more safe. And just that rhetoric alone helps to feed some of the groups their recruiting tactics, their ability to try to divide people and make people more fearful. People groups like Daesh, they really thrive on fear. They want people to fear each other. They want people to turn against each other. And to the credit of America and American values and the American people, we've largely been resilient to that. The American Muslim community is a very well integrated community in this country. And the American people broadly have rejected efforts, by people to cause divisions. And we've seen in the past few days, because the remarks that you referenced weren't the first time that people have been, trying to focus on Islam or Muslims in general. This has been happening over the past several years. And so we've seen over the past several years a number of initiatives taken by communities throughout the United States, interfaith communities, religious communities, people from the Jewish community, the Christian community, the Sikh community, people from even non-religious communities, civil society groups, human rights groups, civic organizations, all coming together to reject discrimination and to reject a climate of fear and to reinforce the values, the American values that we have of pluralism and inclusion. And so even in response to these latest comments, we've seen a lot of those voices, again, becoming very prominent. We had letters from thousands of rabbis across the country rejecting this kind of divisive discussions and rhetoric. And we've seen political leaders across the spectrum rejecting this type of rhetoric and discussions and dialogue. And so I think, even though this one individual that you mentioned has gotten a lot of press attention, I think some of these concerns and some of these views have been, lurking in certain corners of the country. And, we're very honest in our discussions internationally. America is not perfect. We have issues to deal with of racism in America. We have issues to deal with of discrimination or bigotry in America. But even though we have those issues, we have a structure, we have a system, we have a society that's open and willing to discuss them. We have a free media that's able to look at those issues, and we have a free, a commitment to freedom of expression that allows people to speak up, to reject those kind of instances of bigotry. And so we've seen a flurry of op-eds and letters and other really eloquent voices coming out in various outlets, rejecting that kind of division, talking about the various Muslim American leaders who are leaders in various aspects of society. The president himself talked about Muslim Americans as being our neighbors, our first responders, people in military service, people in government service, sports heroes. And so, it's unfortunate, but sometimes when ugly things are said, it gives us an opportunity to reflect on all of the good that we also have.
But there is a concern among lots of Americans, and sometimes rightly so, that some of these heinous crimes were committed or perpetrated by some Muslims, either Muslim Americans or Muslim visitors, foreigners. And that's been basically the subject in lots of those circles that you just mentioned. Do you think the president was successful in addressing those issues as well? Yes, discrimination is wrong, but at the same time, you see this trend, not just here in America, but overseas, against Westerners, against Americans, that a lot of that violence being committed by Muslims. So how do you address that issue? How do you draw a line that this is discrimination and this is actual and justified criticism of this?
Right. No, but the president did directly address that. I mean, he mentioned specifically that we're dealing with particular terrorist groups and organizations that are carrying out this violence. And you're right. We've seen, the Paris attacks. We've seen attacks in Mali. We've seen attacks in Lebanon. We've seen attacks in other countries. So this is not an isolated incident, right? This is a concern that many countries face and a challenge that many countries face. Pakistan as well. And so the critical part in addressing that is to focus on the problem, because if you just focus on one characteristic of an individual, you say many of these people who carried out the attacks are Muslim. Well, they also had black hair. Do we want to target all people with black hair? No, right? You need to look at the characteristics that relate to them, and the issue is people who are, who have a commitment to using violence to carry out their goals and means, and most of these individuals are affiliated or part of these larger groups that have a particular ideology that justifies violence, often in the name of Islam, and so there is that religious element to it, and that's undeniable that there is a religious element to it, but that's not the only element to it. There are also political grievances. There are also economic grievances. There are also many factors that can motivate individuals to want to join a group like that or want to carry out violence like that. So just focusing on the religious aspect of it is it's counterproductive, because the vast majority of the 1.5 billion Muslims in the world categorically reject terrorism. In fact, Muslims are the number one victims of terrorism, and Muslims are at the forefront of the fight against terrorism. The troops in Pakistan who are fighting the terrorists are Muslims. The troops in Iraq who are fighting Daesh are Muslims. The Kurdish and Syrian fighters who are fighting Daesh are Muslims. The troops in Nigeria that are fighting Boko Haram are significantly Muslim. The American forces that are fighting in these areas, many, we have Muslim Americans who are also serving the forces. So it's not an issue of Muslim versus
in Pakistan, this Zarb-e-Azb operation in Pakistan.
Exactly.
Is of course, Pakistanis fighting against those extremists.
And in Afghanistan, the Afghan army is primarily Muslim fighting the Taliban. So the issue of the religion isn't the primary factor. You have to look at what group they're aligning with, what are the motivations for the violence. And it's also an issue, we mentioned a number of countries, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nigeria, Mali, all of these different places, Iraq, Syria. The context in which the violent groups that operate there are very distinct. And first, there is a unifying ideology amongst many of these groups, but there is also other commonalities relating to the political realities. You have obviously in Iraq, you had a shifting of the state structure since the U.S. invasion in 2003, and the transition that was happening there politically. In Syria, you had a uprising of individuals seeking democracy, which were brutally crushed by the dictatorship of Bashar al-Assad, and which led to a civil war in which the Assad government was attacking his people and specifically carrying out operations in a way that was leading to greater and greater radicalization and extremism. And so in these environments where you have war and conflict, or you have crumbling state structures, that is the environment in which these terrorist groups usually find a home and operate.
You travel a lot, due to your responsibility as the special envoy. Those people, they have relatives, their friends, their children living here in this country. And I'm sure they ask you this question, what the United States government is doing to protect their relatives and their friends in this country, in this environment, this charged environment. So I'm sure the president has made some, significant efforts in terms of public statements and everything. But on a different level, law enforcement, the administration is engaged in some solid, concrete steps that you can share with us to protect the Muslim American and the Muslim population in this country.
Absolutely. In the past, just a couple of weeks, in fact, we've had Attorney General Loretta Lynch speak to a group of Muslim Americans, the Muslim Advocates Organization, and she was very clear that her department is going to be working to ensure that hate crimes and other discrimination against Muslim Americans are vigorously investigated and prosecuted. Just the other day, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson was visiting the Adams Center, a mosque here in Virginia, and he was very clear that Muslim Americans are partners with law enforcement, and that it's important that we ensure that the Muslim American community feels safe and protected from any potential threats. And in fact, the programs that the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice are working to improve, it's a lot of times it's called countering violent extremism, or also community partnerships, in terms of these are programs directed at improving the ways that government engages with local communities and improves the way in which the local communities have access to government resources in order to ensure that they have the resources they need to protect their own communities. Because the reality is that groups like Daesh, like ISIS, they are targeting Muslims, including Muslim Americans, but Muslims around the world, and other marginalized, they're targeting individuals who they feel are marginalized, or who they think they can get them to believe in their warped ideology. And so it's really important for individuals as parents, as community leaders, to be aware of the fact that there are these external threats that are seeking to indoctrinate or poison young individuals. And this just isn't just true for the Muslim American community. This is true for communities throughout the United States, where you have gangs, you have right-wing militia groups, you have white supremacist groups who are seeking to target and recruit individuals. And so it's important for communities, including the Muslim American community, to be aware of resources that are available, to be aware of warning signs. You know, if they find their child has a Twitter account and they're having discussions with people who are supporters, that's something that parents need to know about, that this is a potential risk of their child being recruited.
One last question, Ambassador. In the aftermath of the California attacks, do you anticipate any changes in the refugees policy of the United States?
Well, the President has also, and the Secretary of State have also been very clear about our refugee policy, that the United States has always been a welcome home for individuals who are fleeing persecution and fleeing violence. And our borders have always been welcome to the individuals who are fleeing such instances. And we take in refugees and asylum seekers from around the world. Right now, a lot of people are focused on refugees from Syria and that conflict in particular. And the people in Syria who are fleeing are people who are fleeing two threats. Number one, they're fleeing a government which has decided to directly attack its citizens and has been bombing civilians throughout the past few years. And on the second hand, they're also fleeing terrorist groups like Daesh, which are also terrorizing communities in the areas in which they control. And so these are individuals that deserve the protection from the international community. They've been registered by the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. They undergo an extensive vetting process. Sometimes it takes up to 2 years before an individual ever makes it onto American soil. They go through the most extensive security vetting of any individual that's brought into the United States. So in terms of security concerns, there are no security concerns that we have that are unique to them because they go through such a rigorous process. And we're ensuring that that process is a process that we're very comfortable with and secure about.
Thank you, Ambassador. We are completely out of time.
Okay.
I really appreciate your time once again.
Thank you so much.
And welcome to the show. Inshallah, we'll see you some other time as well.
Inshallah.
And appreciate your wisdom and your input. And these are very difficult times for all of us. We'll cope with it. And so thank you very much once again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching Cafe DC. I'm Faiz Rahman. Until next week, goodbye.